Okay, so when did you first have your first panic attack? Like that you now know was actually a panic attack.
Okay. I was gonna think college, but the first one that I had was in high school, and it was probably like junior year in high school, and I was stressed with school and AP tests, and school was just very hard, and I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yeah.
And I think I came home from school, and I was just like panicky and overwhelmed and crying and like bawling and like breathing hard. And I have had different symptoms with different panic attacks, but this one was more like that. And
it was more emotional.
It was, yeah, I was crying a lot, and it got to the point of like I need to like lay down and take a nap, and like I can't breathe, and
right.
And so my mom made me take a nap and like go to my room and sleep and drink some hot tea, and that now that I know, like that was my first sure like a panic attack, because I couldn't control anything, and I was tired, and I had to do more homework in school.
It's so confusing.
Yeah.
In the middle of that too. What are your most common symptoms, do you think? Like whenever you're having a panic attack, or just having a more anxious day in general?
So for panic attacks, I mean, I'm gonna speak on my worst one that I've ever had, which was last month. So like last year in October. It was like I work myself up to a point of where I can't move and I'm shaking, and I can't say anything either. And I hadn't experienced that before. It was like I could calm myself down enough to be like, I'm not doing well and I need someone to help me. But this one was like, I went down into my bed, into my comforter, called my friend, couldn't even talk, and she just like started praying over me.
Yeah.
And that calmed me.
That sounds almost borderline, like almost catatonic.
I don't know,
like to a little extent, where you are aware and you're lucid in your mind, but your body kind of shuts down.
Yeah.
Your speech shuts down. You can't really move.
Yeah. That's
almost like a coma sometimes.
Yeah,
say.
It was like my body was so worked up that it just we've talked about this, it starts circling and then you can't get out of it. And that's exactly what happened. Like I thought I was fine, but then I think whenever I share with someone how I'm doing, it's actually worse than I think. And then it just went down from there, and I was just crying and breathing heavy, and I like was shaking, and I couldn't, like my legs gave out, and I just had to like lay down, and then I was just so exhausted after that.
Yeah,
and
no,
went to
it's
sleep.
so annoying. I remember I was walking with my mom in Target. I think this was like in high school whenever I had actually had to withdraw from like classes and everything, but we were walking around Target, and all of a sudden I started feeling like a panic attack coming on, and my legs started stiffening up, and it felt like I was walking through like quicksand to try to get through Target, and I was like, Mom, I think we might need to get a shopping cart because I don't think I can walk. And she was like, oh, okay. So that was not fun. But yeah, no, I feel that like all the time. That's one of like I would say one of my main symptoms is like just like slowing down.
And for you, like just background on you.
Yeah.
Would you say that you can randomly get a panic attack just randomly?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like in Target, in maybe, I don't know if while driving, but like at any point.
100%.
What's like one of the first symptoms that comes and you're like, oh no?
So I immediately start getting like heart racing and just this overall feeling of kind of terror and getting really, really hot. When I think back to like my first panic attack that I know now what it was, it was it was my senior year, our first pep rally, and I never was nervous to like perform in front of people. I never cared. Like I thought it was so fun to be down there talking with everybody and just like whatever. But I remember I was down there and all of a sudden I just felt like so hot, like just like burning up. My chest was just like racing. I felt super nauseous. Like I literally felt like I was gonna throw up. I was like, I cannot throw up in front of the entire school right now. I was blanking out because I think that like routine we were doing, we had like do like a dance or something, and I literally was like, oh my gosh, do I know it?
Something just happened.
Do I know it?
Yeah.
And like I have to keep thinking about it. I just felt awful, like just super crappy. I just felt so scared. I remember like going to my friend's mom who was like sitting there next to the court, and I was like, I don't feel good. And she was like, that's not normal for you. That one seemed to kind of come out of nowhere. Like I don't really remember necessarily a specific trigger, maybe since my body had been building up anxiety disorder symptoms. Any kind of excitement could start it, which is what happens to me too still. Even if I'm happy excited, it can start a panic attack.
Interesting, bro.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Yeah. I think for me, my triggers are, or I've learned my triggers the past year of like, okay, like when I start overworking or performing or not prioritizing my need for rest or my need to be like, okay, I'm not going to be enough in this moment and I can't overwork and perform and be perfect, then I like start spiraling.
Right.
And that's like a trigger for me. But like clinically, like your body just responds like that.
Yeah.
That's what it is for you, and it can be different for anyone.
It's really strange. Speaking of that, this is healthline.com, and it has lots of different articles about mental health, etc., etc. But I found that like depression and anxiety, like come hand in hand. I rarely know a person who has anxiety or anxiety disorder who hasn't also dealt with depression.
Wow.
You know? I mean, because anxiety is just fear. And if you're constantly
and then you become fear, depressed, like a heavy blanket's over you.
Yeah, because you're not experiencing anything happy or exactly. These are some assumptions about depression, but I think that they go hand in hand with anxiety. So this first one says you can simply snap out of it.
Love that. That's for depression?
This is for depression and anxiety, in my opinion. I get that all the time. Whenever, like, has someone ever said that to you before? Like, okay, you just gotta snap out of it.
I think because I didn't know this, but I struggled with depressive episodes or just feeling like I was depressed a lot in my childhood, that people would say, you know, you're so serious, or stop being so hard on yourself, or like in a way, like that. But I would just keep having the same thought.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, go very abstract, and I would just feel like I was decaying.
Right. So like, when I think of like this too, as like you can simply snap out of it, I also think of you're just overthinking. You're just like a worrywart. Like, you just have to focus your mind on something else. Yeah. And that that's the worst freaking thing for someone to say. Yeah. Because, heck yeah, dude, like, you think I want to just sit here and be anxious and sad? No. Like, if I could change my mindset, I would totally do that. Right. If I could just focus on something else. Yeah. Like,
I think that's it's all about the mindset, and like let's say for you, like, because your body causes it, like, you can't just switch out of it and stop crying or stop shaking.
Yeah.
And, like, with a panic attack, of course, but for me, I think I cannot have someone supporting me in that way, because that's not loving and that's not empathetic. And if someone's sympathetic, that's even worse for me, because they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for you. And I hate it.
The sympathy from people who don't understand.
Yeah, I feel very uncomfortable. So I need someone in my life who can, like, walk me through it and, like, where my process went. And then, you know, I've realized that I do carry around a lot of fear, and that I've learned to, like, rebuke it and bind that spirit, and lose the spirit of, like, faith and grace and love, and also counseling has helped, because I have had a lot. Thank goodness I don't have as much anymore, but going back to, like, deep roots that have caused a mindset or a habit to form of I'm not good enough, or just spiraling into negativity.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I know that we've said this, like, in conversations before, but especially because fear seems to be, like, the number one forefront thing with anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
It's so hard to, again, like, going back to that, it's like, you don't just change your mind. It's like, you're so enwrapped with fear. And of course, no one wants to just be sitting in fear.
You can't, like, jump out of it. You have to go into it and be like, oh, why are you fearing right now? Tell me about your day. Or, like, let's go through it. Let's not just be strong and get over it. Let's be vulnerable and go through it.
Yes. And even sometimes, though, for me, like, someone will ask me, well, what do you think is causing this right now? And I'm like, I genuinely don't know. Like, I don't know. But whenever I do start getting into a panic attack, anxiety attack, or depression, I feel fearful, and then my mind starts thinking of all the negative things that could ever possibly happen that aren't going great right now. So it's not like I've thought about something and all of a sudden I'm just sad about that one thing. I mean, I can be, but not, well, most of the time it's not. So it's really weird when someone asks me, like, okay, like, what is making you worry right now? And I'm like, I don't know, because I was fine, but then I started worrying, and now I'm worrying about this scenario that hasn't even happened yet,
goes out the
or
window.
Probably won't even happen,
No,
etc. And so it really does come down to, like you said, rebuking that spirit, because
it does.
Like, again, I've said this to you many times before, and hopefully if anyone has read the Bible, then they would know that do not fear is probably, like, the most repeated command in the entire book, and it's frustrating for me sometimes, because I'm like, that's not a suggestion, it's a commandment, because he's like, when you have me leading you, you will not have to fear. But I'm still fearful, and so sometimes I'll sit in my room and be like, God, I'm so sorry, I'm not trying to disobey your commandments. Like, I don't want to be fearful, but I just am.
Because we're also imperfect, and he knows that, and there's grace, but if we give ourselves over to fear, we're under the strategies of the enemy, and then the enemy messes with us. So I think it's great to be talking about what fear looks like, and how we deal with it, and what God calls us to, because if we are under fear, I lived in fear for so long until in April, I started, choosing to be like, I do not accept the fear today. It's actually not me. It's a mindset that I can change for me personally.
And it's good, though, because you can do that because of the Holy Spirit through you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I just was like to go by myself and be like, I'm going to change my mind. No way would I be able to help.
No.
But because of the power,
the
Holy Spirit through us, he's able to reach through and be like, all right, well, I'm going to take you out of this.
And that's why it's so good to know, like, this might sound spiritual, to bind and rebuke spirits, but there is good and evil in this world. There's light and darkness, and if you are a spiritual person, you know that there's things you don't want to follow, and it's all about knowing the strategies of what the bad thing is trying to make you do or trying to attack you on. So it's been a great thing to have friends in my life that are like, the enemy's trying to do this to you today. You need to rebuke and bind and leave that at the foot of the altar in front of God and let God protect you today, because his, we need to be following truth of he protects us and loves us and cares for us and is okay with us falling back into fearing, or God, like, I'm really scared about my job, I'm really scared about COVID and this election, like, would you help me? And really choosing, okay, I trust you right now, and I let go of that fear, and I'm gonna go have dinner, and if that thought comes back at dinner, I'm gonna remind myself what I prayed before dinner.
That's why it's so important to know your enemy and who you're dealing with.
It is. Because I've learned that so much this year.
Anybody, I say this to every single person, C.S. Lewis, The Screw Tape Letters, oh my gosh, I can never read it enough.
It's a really interesting book.
Spiritual fiction, but it's written in a way that is based off of
the works of the enemy and how they try to mess with us, destroy our plans that God has made us for.
A truthful way. So he's not necessarily telling a legit story of like, this is what the Bible says and this is a whole story from the Bible. It's more of a scenario, but everything that he says in it is biblical, and he's taken from what he learned from Scripture. And every time I read that, like, it's some people can't do spiritual warfare. Some people just, they can't.
What do you mean, like, learn about it? I'm one of those people. Really? I have not read through the whole book.
Oh, yeah?
But I know that it has impacted so many people. I think people, or Christians, Christ followers, are called to take up the sword of the Spirit and spiritual warfare. But you don't necessarily, God doesn't call us to understanding the ways of darkness.
Right.
And not that book is doing that at all. But for me, I'm more sensitive to, okay, what's God's truth? Okay, let me deliver myself, bind spirits, instead of going into, I already focus so much on what the enemy's doing and how he has power over my life, that I'm trying to switch to, okay, actually God has power over my life.
Yes.
So that's just a little tidbit about me, of people need to spiritual warfare, but knowing it in some sort of detail is great if that helps you more. For me, it's different. And either way is great.
Yeah. So with me, I guess I'm just like a sassy person. Like, like I just get like heated up really quick.
And we did not just do that for me.
And just every single book, well, they're called letters because Screw Tape Letters, but every single book in that book is very short, maybe like a couple pages, so it's almost like but it's also so rich. So I could only maybe read like one a night.
Yeah.
And every scenario that was in this is just crazy. Now, for some reason, whenever I read it, I just feel like this is an exposure on Satan. And which I do get what you're saying too, with knowing too much of darkness and like
the way of darkness.
Yes, because that definitely gets to me in some situations too. And there are some things that, like, even in this book, I'll read and I'm like, that's not cool, but at the same time,
that's suspicious.
That's suspicious, but it's telling me how lowly and just powerless.
How they try to really twist things when it's really not going to work.
The enemy and
because they've already lost.
Are so sneaky. Yes. And I'll read it and even just think, I mean, I'll read it and just all of a sudden I feel like I'm hyped up and I'm ready to just like post up to the enemy and anybody.
Yeah.
And it sticks in my brain because then whenever I'm having a certain instance, for instance in a panic attack where your brain isn't thinking rationally, which is when the enemy is going to try to jump in because it's a little like weak point there. Let me just, because he's shady. But like then once I've known even just some of the smallest little things, I recognize it in the moment and I'm like, oh dude, Satan's loving this right now. He's loving this right now. And then even that, because sometimes I feel like we can't fully comprehend God's love for us because it's so beyond our understanding that sometimes we don't feel an overwhelming peace because we have nothing to compare it to. But we do experience pain on earth, and so we can at least kind of comprehend, like, okay, the enemy brings pain. I don't want that.
Right.
So if I'm in a situation where I'm having a panic attack, whatever, and I'm not necessarily just feeling God's peace or presence, I still know what it feels like to have pain, and so I immediately am like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to snap back and not let Satan do that.
Because God is always present, but that doesn't mean you always feel His presence. And I think that's a great point to add, that we cannot depend on joy and contentment based off of a really good day. Because God's presence may not always be there in that moment of having a crappy day.
Yeah.
And like having that pain of like, oh, okay, so the enemy's trying to try something right now. I will not bow to fear right now in this instant, for my job, for COVID, for an apartment. And then it helps me to recognize it and be like, oh, this is not me. This is straight from hell, and I don't have to follow it. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, no. Oh gosh, why can't I recite that verse word for word? But you know, like the joy that is, but the pain you're experiencing now doesn't compare to the joy that is coming. And that's really true. Yeah. And we really don't understand the full extent of the joy with Christ, and that's why it is really hard whenever we're feeling pain, because we know what really bad pain feels like, but we don't know the extent of the joy that we can have. But that also drives me, because I'm a person that like gets driven by like getting called out, or you know, like reading up on how Satan tries to be all shady and you know, and then it makes you want to fight back.
Yes, so for sure. I don't know what switched for me. I'm just so thankful that in May, like, I had a realization. I was like, I'm getting angry at all these different people in my life. I'm getting angry at my situation. And I'm not getting angry at the person that is making all this crap go down. Yeah. I'm not getting angry at Satan right now, and I need to be, because he's the one that has orchestrated this, not God. God will make good out of it, as, like, that verse says. I literally have my wall. In Genesis says it with Joseph. And I just get so angry now of like, no, I'm not going to step foot into this place, because God has called me to greater things. He has better things for me. And it is going to be painful, but we're supposed to rejoice in fiery trials, like First Peter says. And God loves us through it. Yes. And He's able. No matter if He shows up or doesn't, He's omnipresent. 100%. Period. No cap. That's what, you know, that's the hard thing about the gospel and being a Jesus follower, is that you're promised joy and peace and strength, but people don't understand that it's not necessarily in this lifetime. And we do have a level like
of it.
Fullness, you mean? Yes. Because we have fruits of the Spirit. Yes. But the fullness of it, and being safe, being whole, being healed.
Yes. So whenever people hear about, you know, Jesus, and like, I have anxiety and I feel depressed, you say that like I'm gonna feel peace and joy, and I'm gonna prosper. But
I see
actually,
where you're going with this. Yes,
you're stepping into a battlefield, like.
So you fight. You have to. It's a tug. I would call it a tug and war of
easy thing.
You can step into. I'm gonna choose fear the rest of my life, and then die with all of that. Or you can fight for it. I choose to have faith in the unseen that God is fighting for me, and that's our peace. It's fully in Him now. It's not in these circumstances.
Yes.
I can't depend on anything right now.
Whenever, and that's also a good thing for counseling.
I
personally think anyone should go to counseling.
I do too, because even as a grown man or a grown woman, there are things that you come up on a random day where you're triggered, and then that actually leads to something way deeper that you can grow stronger in, and then become a better husband. I pray to be a better wife when I am one, a better friend, a better individual. It's so good to know the techniques. I've learned so much about myself, and I know my triggers during the week. I can't work 10 hours. I cannot, because then I do tend to spiral into depression. And I know that other people in my life can work a lot and they thrive off of it, and that's just who they are. And so comparison comes into play, and that's a huge thing to really just not even go to. But I do, but then we fight it off. So techniques are huge.
Yes, techniques. Whenever we're in our right minds, whenever we're ourselves, because our anxious selves, our panicking self, and our depressed selves are not our real selves, is the thing. So, like, when people are like, you're depressed, I'm like, no, I struggle.
I struggle. I think wording is huge, and saying I struggle with depression, I struggle with anxiety, because yes, like, you can't control it. It is something you cannot control, but you can say, okay, I know this is happening right now. Let me know the truth and, like, battle through it. And that's
my counselor was funny because, or one of my first counselors that I tried was like, so we know that your anxiety, depression is not you, so let's come up with a name for it. So, like, we're talking about it, like, in whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I couldn't think of anything, but I was like, well, it's just, like, the opposite of me. And she's like, well, then what's your name pronounced backwards? Akaber.
Akaber. Oh my god.
I couldn't take it seriously, but, like, she's like, okay, well, Akaber's doing this.
Yeah, Akaber's acting up on a Tuesday. Yeah, she needs to sit down.
I think that, one, mental health just has to be talked about more.
Yes.
2, it's not taboo. 3, it's not something, I mean, yes, it is scary, but it's not something that everyone should just be like, like,
because you can get through it. It's when you're in the moment. You're not thinking straight, and it's very difficult to think that you can get up the next morning. That you can have the afternoon to yourself. You really do not think you can go any farther.
It is serious, so, like, don't approach it lightheartedly.
Yes.
Don't assume, like, whenever even if you're going to be in a relationship with someone, whether it's a friendship, dating, married, anything, you do not want to approach it lightheartedly, because you're going to come off as cold. You are going to be ignorant. And it probably is going to make things worse. And then it's going to make things worse for you, because you don't understand what actually is happening. That's why education is
very much
so important. All of that being said, that's a lot of information, and it is scary, and it's weird and uncomfortable for certain people to talk about, and it's not a fun thing to go through, but I'm actually so grateful that God entrusted me with this battle, because I was one of those people who didn't understand. Even having a older sister, multi-handicapped, mental health issues, I just didn't have the empathy. Whenever people told me they were depressed or anxious, I was like, okay, I don't want you to be like that. But in my mind, I'm like, but the solutions are so simple, because whenever you're anxious, panicking, depressed, you're stuck in your own little box and you can't see out of it. But everyone else is outside of your box and can see the whole perspective. And that's the frustrating thing. I was like, dude, just do this. But whenever God decided that he was going to let me go through it, oh my gosh, it softened my heart so much.
Yeah, I've definitely been thankful for it, because...
And it's hard to say that. Sometimes I don't feel thankful for it.
No. I'm sick and tired of it, and I want it to be gone from my life.
Yeah.
But I think I've learned that, like, this isn't a punishment for something bad I've done. This isn't God forcing this on my life. Bad things happen, and God can make good out of it.
Yeah.
Because we all have free will, and there's a sinful world we were born into. And I just thank God that I have now techniques to I recognize myself, what state I'm in, so that I can get through it, because I didn't have the capabilities or like the toolbox to overcome, get through, walk through, struggle with depression or anxiety a year ago. And so I was at my just a very low point. And now I think I'm so thankful, and such a testimony to being a miracle in this life, of him working a miracle in my life, of everything that I've gone through, and how that could have been used for evil and just made me really depressed the rest of my life. But through walking it out and having people around me, it's been a process, and I look back and I'm just like, I weep, and I'm just so grateful for how he's taken me out of depths and sorrow and into newness. So very thankful.
Yeah, I feel like I've been blessed with empathy, compassion. Gosh, I mean, even just getting off my high horse sometimes, it's given me so many tools, and actually has made me happier in some circumstances, because I feel like I can see people as a whole and how God sees them, and it makes loving others so much stronger. And I used to not be an emotional person, but now I'm like so emotional, like big softy. I might not show it, but it just brings me so much joy to know that I can connect and relate to people. And I'm normal. I'm normal. And isn't it funny how Satan causes bad things to happen. He's the prince of darkness. He's the ultimate liar, etc., etc. But God is, in fact, in control of everything. However, he's using Satan to heal us, while Satan's constantly trying and trying to break us down. No matter how hard he tries,
if we submit,
he's
and
a
surrender,
tool to God, and he's mad about that.
Right, because Genesis, I think 23, it's when he's speaking about Joseph, of what people or the enemy meant for evil, God uses for good. So God is using, all these bad things for good, and we may not see it immediately. I didn't see it immediately in my life. For other things, I did see some great things come out. And, the enemy doesn't ever win. We overcome evil with good, and God already has a victory. So
he's a tool, okay? The enemy is a tool. And
You just have to see it that way and get angry and fight up against him and not see him as bigger than goodness and God.
Exactly. It brings me a lot of peace to just be like,
he can't do anything to us.
Yeah, we really are safe.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.